Hi, everyone. Welcome to SCARE. Thank you for joining us today for our quarterly training series. I'm Taylor. I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator here at SCARE, and I work directly with tutoring services and our other youth programs as well. And so today we'll be diving into our Elevate Training Series 1.0. And so if you've been joining along for these quarterly trainings for a while, you might notice it's a little different this time around. For the past few years, we have focused on Momentum as our quarterly career training series. And so now we're kind of shifting over to a new theme. And so now we have Elevate, and this is the kickoff of our new series. So, like I said, if you've been joining these for a while, you know a little bit about our Momentum career training series. And in those ones, we really focus on building the momentum to achieve your goals just by taking things one step at a time, right? So we really focused on the idea of trying to complete one small step and being able to kind of use that to help move you forward, right? So we always kind of give comparisons like when you are pushing a snowball down a mountain. It might start really small at first, move very slowly, but as the snow kind of grows around it, the snowball gets bigger and eventually starts building speed and it goes faster and faster. So in that case, we're like the snowballs every single time that we get another goal that we've reached, right? So taking these little steps kind of builds us up and helps us to move faster and really keep going towards our goals. And so in our Momentum career training series, we really focused on building a variety of career skills specifically, as well as interpersonal skills and organizational skills just to help you out along the way. And so we can think of this new series, Elevate, as being like a sequel to the Momentum career training series. So if you haven't already viewed some of our Momentum trainings, I highly recommend going to our YouTube page and watching some of those. It has some really great information. For example, we covered some topics such as resume development and tips for that, networking and volunteering, professional communication, and just the different types of communication in the workplace and in our like relationships with people around us. We went over credit scores, budgeting, time management, and different like organizational skills. And then we also had a series of Meet the Employers. So you all got to hear from different hiring employers to figure out what it is that they look for in candidates and the reasons why they hired the people that they did. And so on the kind of like reverse part of that, we had Meet the Employees. So you get to hear from different employees just to hear what is important to them in a workplace and what keeps them at their job, what motivates them. And these are only a handful of the topics that we covered. Like I said, we had done the Momentum series for a few years. So there's a lot of other great information that I didn't even mention in this time around. So highly recommend going back and viewing those. And just to give you an idea of our schedule for the upcoming Elevate trainings, right now we are in December, so we have our official 1.1 being released. And then we will have our next one coming up in March, following in June, and then the last part of our 4-part series will be in September. So now we can start to dive into why we chose Elevate as the theme for this training series. All right, so we'll start off with the dictionary definition, which is just to raise or lift something up to a higher position, or to raise to a more important or impressive level. So again, in Momentum, we really focused on kind of like building up those basic skills. And so now the idea for Elevate is that we're going to take those skills that we have been working on and improve them and kind of raise ourselves to a new level, right? So it's kind of like taking our life into the next level, moving forward now that we have kind of a good basis and just kind of continuing to go and move up. So here are a couple of quotes that I thought were relevant for this whole theme of Elevate. So the first one we have is elevate your thinking and change your world. When you raise your mindset, everything around you elevates too. And then the real one that really seems to fit our theme for Elevate. The best way to predict the future is to create it. Your actions will elevate you to the future you envision. And so we really want to focus on just figuring out what we want for ourselves and for the future ahead of us, and just knowing that we do have the means and the support systems that can help us reach it, right? So whether it's family, friends, tribal TANF, SCARE, we're here to support you and help you elevate to the future you want. So in our Elevate training series, we'll be focusing on a few different areas of skills. And so, for example, we'll work on professional skills still, and work on that for obtaining and retaining work. So elevating professional skills helps refine and build your expertise, embrace leadership, and stay adaptable in an ever-evolving world, right? And so it's really important to keep on building the professional skills because things are always changing. So even though maybe you have experience with resumes, we'll keep on touching on subjects like that as things change. You know, they want things to look different now. There's different ways of wording things or just like the organization of it. So just staying on top of all the changes and being flexible enough to deal with it. And so we'll also work on personal skills to help you maintain a better work-life balance. So elevating personal skills can empower you to make better decisions, cultivate meaningful connections, and create a positive impact on those around you. So again, even just being able to maintain our personal skills can really help, not only just like in our everyday life, but it helps us out even when we're looking at careers or our professional life, right? So being able to kind of intertwine the two can be really helpful. And then also we'll be focusing on finding new ways to learn and create your vision for your future. So elevating your mind involves constantly challenging your thoughts, expanding your knowledge, and cultivating a mindset that thrives on growth and learning. So these are some of the kind of like areas that we're trying to focus on for our Elevate series and get creative with it. So I kind of mentioned the balance of personal skills and professional skills. So we're kind of like briefly touch on why it's important to manage like your personal life and your professional life, right? So a lot of the times people treat it like those two should be completely separated. And, you know, you might compartmentalize your personal stuff for part of the day and then professional for the other part of the day. But the reality is that we can't really always separate the two. You know, our experiences, emotions, and responsibilities from one sphere, whether it's personal or professional, will often directly impact the other, right? So, for example, in your personal life, if you're dealing with an illness, or maybe your kids get sick, or there's some family issues going on, that could affect your professional life by leading to things like absences, maybe even a loss of focus at work. I mean, if there's a lot going on in your personal life and it's really stressful, then it might, I mean, understandably, your mind might be on that throughout the day, even when you're at work. So it does affect sometimes productivity and just confidence in the workplace. And so when it's appropriate, I always think it's good to let like your colleagues know at least briefly what's going on. Maybe if it's just even as simple as like, hey, you know, I'm going through a lot, you know, bear with me. Especially if it's really affecting your work, I find that it really helps like the workplace for people to know what's going on. And then kind of on the other side of it, your professional life can also really affect your personal life, right? And that one we see so much more too when we're talking about like workload, or if you have a really busy day at work, maybe even a conflict with a coworker, those kinds of things would lead to like maybe some stress and burnout, loss of energy, which can affect the way that you treat people outside of work, right? And then even if you're working a job that's taking over a lot of your time because you have so much to do, it can kind of start to lead into maybe you're kind of working later hours and you're not able to do the things that you want in your life with family and friends, right? So it kind of affects the balance. And so in a similar way, I would also So either it's good to let family know when you have things going on at work, because I find that it'll help people take things less personally when they know there's more of a reason behind it, right? I know it's so easy for us to take our stress from the day at work, and sometimes it'll come out on the people at home because that's the time when we can relax. Maybe we're less patient or we don't want to do anything because it was such a crazy day. So being open with the people around you whenever you're able to can really help kind of like blend the two personal and professional life and kind of help maintain that balance and understanding. Okay, so today's topics, we're going to get into growth versus fixed mindset. We're also going to touch on how to develop a growth mindset. We are going to practice mapping an ideal life. And then we'll also be revisiting and setting goals, which I know we've done a lot of things on setting goals. And I think it's really important to like continuously check in. So to see if your goals are still the same, see if you've made progress towards your goals. And so instead of just setting a goal and then completely forgetting about it in the future, it's good to kind of revisit, see if you're still maybe on track for what you had previously set for yourself. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about how to give constructive feedback. So we'll go ahead and dive into the definitions for growth mindset and fixed mindset. I mean, these are things that you maybe haven't heard before, but maybe you have. I know a lot of schools, if you, for your kids, they might even be focusing on it more, trying to let them know about it in the classroom or like encourage the growth mindset. So a growth mindset is the belief that skills and abilities can be improved through learning, effort, and persistence. So it's really just the idea of thinking that we can do almost anything that we set our minds to, right? And not being too discouraged. And so the alternative is a fixed mindset, which is the belief that one's abilities and qualities are permanent and cannot be changed, right? So that might be if someone's like, oh, if you have a child and they're like, oh, I'm no good at reading, I'm not good at it. But instead of kind of coming at it with that just permanent, like I'm just not good at it, the growth mindset might take that and turn it into like, yeah, it's challenging for me, but I can improve. And so just like our children with maybe reading and math, we need to also try to adapt our own growth mindset to help us succeed and help us stay encouraged and on track in our careers and in our lives. So just kind of comparing some of the traits of like a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So, and you can think about maybe if these sound familiar to you, if it seems like something that you do or something that you want to do. So a growth mindset, someone with a growth mindset might be more willing to take on new challenges, go outside of their comfort zone, try new things, and oftentimes they'll think of mistakes as learning instead of it just being a pure failure. And then also, again, the belief that you can do most things with hard work and a lot of effort. And then a growth mindset would be able to reflect on feedback that people give them and improve rather than just taking it for criticism or kind of just trying to stay the same. On the other hand, someone with a fixed mindset might be a little more scared of failure, and that might even lead them to not do things, right? Even if they want to do it, but if they're scared of failing, it might hold them back. So they also might give up easily on a task if it becomes too challenging. Might experience negative self-talk, avoid trying new things, ignore feedback that people give them. Again, they might take it more as like a criticism and get defensive than to actually listen to the feedback and try to be better or change from it, right? It feels a lot more personal. There also could be the belief that you're never going to be good at things. So I kind of gave like the example for like if someone is like, I'm no good at reading. Well, it's just like, or I'm never going to be good at reading. So it's just kind of like thinking that things are set. And lastly, fixed mindset might be more prone to like comparing yourself to others. So you'll see someone else's success or the way that they're doing in life and use it in a way that kind of it's like negative towards yourself, right? Oh, like, oh, well, I'm not doing that. Or it might be a negative thing. Maybe you're criticizing them, like, oh, why would they do it that way? just a lot of the comparison to other people. So now that we've gone over like the definitions and some of the traits for growth mindsets and fixed mindsets, I have a list of phrases here that kind of gives the growth mindset phrase and maybe how someone with a fixed mindset might actually think in the same situation. Right. So someone with a fixed mindset might say something like, well, I'm either good at something or I'm not. Whereas a growth mindset would think, oh, well, it's challenging, but I can improve with practice and effort. A fixed mindset, once they get some feedback, maybe they're at work and their boss tells them something, you might think, oh, my boss criticizes how I do things. Like they're just never happy with it. It's more of a negative like tone to it. But a growth mindset could try to turn it into, my boss gives me feedback to help me improve. Fixed mindset might think, oh, I'm not good at writing. But a growth mindset would think of the task as challenging, but knowing that you can improve. And then a fixed mindset might have a thought like, my friend is so much more successful than me. Whereas a growth mindset could see a friend's success and think, wow, that inspires me and encourages me to work hard. And oftentimes, too, a growth mindset might be like, well, let me reach out to the friend to see if they have some tips on what they're doing. How are they staying motivated? How are they staying organized? They probably have some good advice. And so that's kind of like how you can take fixed mindset thoughts, because I think almost all of us have those fixed mindset thoughts at some point or another. And so just recognizing and knowing how to turn it into a growth mindset. So if you are wanting to try to gear more towards a growth mindset, here's some quick little challenges to try to help gear you in that direction. So one thing could be, maybe in the workplace or if you volunteer somewhere, ask to help out on a task that you've never done before, just to learn new skills. Right. So again, it's about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit and knowing that, hey, it's okay to not be great at something right now because I can learn it. You could also research some videos or information on a new topic to learn, right? There's so many things on the internet now that are just at our fingertips. It could be going on YouTube and putting on some videos on topics that you wanted to learn more about, things that you wanted to learn how to do. There's so many things that you can dive into. Could even be starting a new hobby, even if you have no experience in it. So again, just pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to think, yeah, I can try something and I don't have any idea where to start, but going for it anyways. And it also feels really good when you start a new hobby and you actually, it actually turns out well and it ends up being something you keep doing. So these are just a few small things you can try to do kind of in your daily life at some point to help grow more of a growth mindset. So now we're going to go more in depth on developing a growth mindset. So some of the first steps would be to actually reflect on your thought patterns and figure out if you lean more towards a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So just be mindful about when you do encounter a challenge, how your brain is reacting. Are you having those thoughts that's like, I should give up, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm never going to be good at this? Or do you have a mindset that's like, oh, okay, well, let me take a deep breath and I'll do it. I'll get it done, or I'll learn from this. And so once you kind of figure out what type of mindset you have, again, if you have a fixed mindset, it kind of helps you to reframe it into the growth, right? So that's kind of the next point. When you notice those fixed thoughts, again, which we all have at some point or another, try to reframe it into growth. So it takes a little bit more effort sometimes because the natural thought process might go into something negative, but just being mindful of it and thinking, well, why am I thinking like this? I know that I can do anything. I know I've seen other people do it. I can do it too. Also, besides just focusing on kind of like the thoughts, like reframing fixed thoughts, also just focus on positive action that you've taken and being proud of the steps that you've already taken so far, right? So celebrate every small victory, no matter how small. I don't think there's actually anything is too small of a celebration. So if you're feeling really discouraged, just take a look at all the things you have been able to accomplish. right? And it can help kind of motivate you to see like, oh, wait, it's easy to forget about some of the things that we do in the past, but kind of thinking like, oh yeah, no, I did that and I did get through it. That was really cool. And then knowing that you can do it again with something else. And lastly, just know that growth is a process and not a destination. Understand that you will always be growing, right? Because we can try to improve, try to grow, try to get more into a growth mindset, and we might get closer to a destination, but we're never going to be fully, healed or fully growth mindset 100% of the time. We're always going to slip, when things get really challenging. And so we're always going to be learning and improving and growing. Okay, so now we're going to transition a little more to mapping your dream life, right? So I mentioned that we were going to be trying to envision what your future might be or what you want your future to be and how to kind of take the steps and break it down a little bit to see what you want. So some tips for mapping your dream life. Think about your ideal life and the person that you want to be, right? So maybe you just think about yourself and you want to be a kinder person or you want to be more generous or helpful. Um, maybe you're in your ideal life, you're not even living in California, maybe you're living in a whole other state. Just think about those things that you want for your ideal life. You're here to close your eyes and think, what is my ideal day like? What's my situation like? And yeah, and when you are thinking about your ideal life, it's always good to be realistic. I can really easily in my head think, I'm going to be a billionaire and live in Hawaii or Bora Bora, but that's not realistic. That's probably not going to happen. Not saying that it can't, but it probably will. And so it's definitely better to find something that's more realistic. Like, okay, instead of maybe being a billionaire, I can be financially stable, right? So that's kind of a more realistic approach to the same like idea of finance, but something that's actually achievable for us. And when you are thinking about your ideal life and these like different aspects of life, you always want to focus on things that you can actually work towards. Don't focus on things that can't be changed, right? If it's other people, like you can't change other people. So don't try to have your dream life be having a certain person act a different way, because that's not something we can control, but we can control ourselves and maybe how we interact with those people around us. So only focus on things that you can actually take steps towards. And so some example topics to think about could be your home life. Again, where are you living? What kind of home are you living in? Who's living with you? Could be career, could be hobbies, your health, community, or like building community and relationships with the people around you. So here are kind of like some 4 simple steps for life mapping. So the first step would be to really think about what your core values are. And so our core values are going to be the main things that motivate us and kind of like inspire us in all of our actions throughout the day. So if your core values are family, health, kindness, growth, community, that might motivate us to do certain things, right? So for example, if a core value is health, well, for me, that's going to now motivate me to maybe try to eat healthier or uh, walk for 30 minutes, right? It leads us into whatever we're doing. Community, right? If that's a core value, that could inspire the kind of work that you do. You really want to be involved with community, the people around you. You can have a career in that. And so just think about what your core values are. And so the second step could be envision what your ideal life is like. And so again, that's where you're thinking more the specifics, right? What type of career would you like to be in? Or what are some things about your career? Where do you live? What's your living situation like? What would your ideal routine be throughout the day or throughout the week? So third, set goals that are realistic and aligned with your values and ideal life. So each of these steps is going to build on like the previous one. And so if you're looking at setting goals, well, you might think of goals that can help you reach your ideal life. So if you're trying to get into a certain career, then try to set a goal that might align with that. So it could be going to school to get a certificate that leads you into that career, can help with that career. It could be networking with people in that career. Whatever your goals are, just try to make sure it aligns with your values and what you are actually working towards in your future. And lastly, once you set your goals, you're going to want to develop a plan for action. So start off with simple and realistic things that you can start doing. Again, setting a goal can be really nice to say, oh, I want a career in this field. But the plan for action are this like the parts that really help move you in that direction. So the plan for action could be apply for college, or complete or redo my resume. So it's like the actual things that work towards your goals. So we'll kind of go through this together. You can see a little bit more about what it might look like when you're starting to kind of like map out or figure out your dream life. And so if you have paper in front of you or something to write on, could be your phone, who knows? You can go ahead and go through this process too if it's something that you're interested in. So we can start off with core values, right? So if we want to start off with what things are really important to us, what really motivates us throughout the day, the things that are really important values for me. Again, I'll give some examples that I think are pretty true for me. There's a million values that we all hold, but just thinking of some of the big ones, right? So community is a big one for me. Family. Some other ones could be growth, like personal growth, just never wanting to stay exactly the same. I always want to be doing better. It could be health, right? So whether it's just caring for your current health, if you have something going on, or just trying to be on top of it. Maybe it's also, another one for me is learning. I want to keep on learning. And yeah, here's just, I don't want to overwhelm the page with too much, so we'll just do these 5 right now. But we have community, family, growth, health, and learning. So again, these are things that I hold in my core values, and I want to be mindful of the things that I kind of like do throughout the day, the things that I'm doing in the future to make sure like, oh, no, this makes sense because it really does align with my values. So let's see. Now, once we have our core values all out there, we can start to work on like envisioning your life. And so this is where you're thinking more of the specifics. So it can be as specific as you want it to be, but instead of just saying like, good job, right? Be more specific. We're like, I want a job that I'm passionate about, which thankfully I have found myself a scare. Right. And it could be something more specific. It could also be, well, yep, I want to keep living in San Diego. I like it here. All my family's here. A lot of my friends are here. Hmm. Maybe it's my, I'm envisioning my life, could have a pet. Maybe in the future, I can have this is a big dream now. I'm getting wild with it, but a house in a nice neighborhood, right? In an area that I like. And again, I'm not going to fill up all of them. I think you all get the point. But just thinking about some of the things that you just want in life, like things that like really would be nice for you, right? Even if I'm talking about living in San Diego and other things like living in a walkable part of San Diego. I love going for walks outside. So if I can set up my life in the future to be in a place where it's really easy to walk places and um, all of that, then that can be part of my life vision. You can put as many things as you want on your little dream board of envisioning your life, or as little as you want. And there's really no limits to it, but just think about what you want for the future and yeah, go from there. And so now that we've done some really hard work envisioning our lives, you can move on to setting goals. And so there's a few different ways to set goals. So first of all, we could focus on something like weekly or monthly goals, right? Something that's really quick, something that can be done almost immediately, right? So maybe a weekly goal could be a family picnic at the park. Every week, I would love to family picnic at the park. And so could be tracking your spending for the week, right? Especially if you have a larger goal of uh, being, financially stable or whatever, putting aside a certain amount for savings. Maybe the first step, the first small goal to start with would be tracking your spending for the week. Maybe you have a large goal for just health, if health is a big part of your future, an ideal life, then you can start off with a small goal like stretching for 5 minutes a day. Or if you are passionate about learning, you could learn online for 15 minutes a day, or however often it feels realistic for you. So instead of maybe the super short term goals, we could also do something that's like a semi short term, so 3 month goals. So something that might take a little more time, right? You can't do it immediately, but you can kind of like start to work towards it in a shorter amount of time. So for example, it could be completing a certification or a certain course for something. That's something that could be realistic in 3 months. If you have a goal to get back into reading, just start with reading one book. And again, I talk about trying to make your goals realistic and achievable. And I think it's really important to choose goals that you feel like you can really truly accomplish in that time. Because I can be really ambitious and say, I'm going to read 5 books in 3 months, and it's not impossible. But if I'm starting at a place where I'm almost never reading, then it's going to be a lot harder to immediately switch my entire routine into being able to read 5 books in 3 months. So I would rather start off with one that feels like an accomplishment once I finish it. I don't want to set myself up for some type of failure or like being behind. And another 3 month goal example could be saving $200 in an emergency fund, having that on the side. Maybe it's volunteering at your child's school or being a chaperone on a field trip, right? So it's just things that you could do in a shorter amount of time. Whereas if you were to do some long-term goals, that can be something that maybe takes up to a year or like years. And so again, it depends on how far ahead that you're trying to plan right now and what you're planning for. But it could be a goal like take a family trip somewhere or go on a road trip. It could be staying at a job for a year. Maybe you want to start a business, or maybe you want to pay off debt, right? Those are long-term goals. Those are not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time to do most of these things. And so let's say you now have your goals set. Now we can get into how to map out an action plan, which is basically just being able to break down the steps to reach your goals, right? You can see, I feel like it's really overwhelming to see something like start a business and immediately try to reach that goal, right? You're going to have to realistically break down everything that you need for it, all the logistics of like starting a business, and then work on those one step at a time. So if I'm mapping out an action plan in the center part, yeah, I'll go ahead and have start a business, right? So now the action plan from here, it's all going to stem from it. It's going to look like a crazy little web. But if I want to do that, well, I could start off with, you know, starting off with like deciding on a vision for the business. So almost like how we're mapping out our future, it's almost like mapping out your business, right? What would you want this business to be? Um, do you have a certain timeline that you want this to happen? So vision of business. all starts with, dreaming it up. And so now, once you maybe have a better idea of what business you would like to start, you can get more into the nitty-gritty stuff, right? So researching on that type of business, right? If you're trying to open up a bakery, it'll be good to know a little bit more about bakery, right? So you can look at other bakeries and see what kinds of things they have, figure out what's more successful for them. Is it having a huge menu with a lot of different things, or having a few things that are done really, really well? So research on that type of business. And let's see. You can also, yeah, think about the demand of that business, right? So making sure that it's something that you're setting yourself up for success, something that people will be involved in, and that isn't going to just completely disintegrate as soon as you make it. And so let's say our next plan for action could be, yeah, just developing a business plan. And so that's where you can actually outline and really list out all of the things that you're planning for, right? So that you can take your original vision of business, but combine that now with the research that you did. You can have an idea of things like your goals for this business model, strategies, and then kind of start to at least research, figure out things like funding, marketing, all of that, how it might work. So now the next part of your action plan could be something like, let's say you get really in depth with these first three action plans. Now the next part, you mean business now. You want to secure the funding. You want to be able to start the business, whether it's through your own savings or loans or finding investors, right? So figuring out how much money you would actually need to get everything in place, and then also being able to get the funding for it. And if you're doing an action plan, it could also be broken down into like timelines, right? So if you want to be really, really specific, you can say the vision of business and set a deadline for it. Okay, so maybe it's like every month you're doing something like this. So this is like month one. That's what we're doing. We're spending that whole month really trying to tailor a vision of the business that we want. If you're doing research on that specific sector of business, that type of business, maybe you spend again another month or two on that, and so on. So just setting the different timelines, and it can be weeks, it can be months, whatever makes sense for you. But again, I like to give you guys a general idea of how to do these things, but I'm not going to go through every single step for an action plan. But it's a good way to just map out and like visually see what your goal is, and then kind of get an idea for what you need to do to be able to reach that goal. And it could change, as time goes on too. You might find out that there's more that needs to be done, or there's something that you put on there that you don't really need, doesn't apply to you. But that's enough about dream mapping and dream life mapping, action plans, and all of that. Now we're on to the fun stuff like constructive feedback. And so constructive feedback is a type of feedback that aims to help improve by giving helpful suggestions, advice, or comments. So if you're trying to tell someone that maybe they could have done something better, this constructive feedback is really going to be helpful, especially if you're someone that struggles to like confront someone with it, right? But we want to make sure that our constructive feedback feels like supportive and like it's not a pure criticism. We don't want to make people defensive either. And so here's kind of the general outline for giving constructive feedback. I kind of think of it as a constructive feedback sandwich, and you'll see why. But we start with a positive, so you could tell someone, oh, you did this really well. I loved it. And then you kind of start to transition into the specifics of what can be changed. But like, oh, the only thing I noticed was you didn't do this, or you could have done this. And then when appropriate, you can ask them their thoughts on it. Like, oh, like, how do you feel about that? Right? Get their input and then also give them actionable advice, right? So you already talked about what could have been improved, but now give them the specific steps like, well, you can add this, this, and this to your uh, essay, whatever it is that you're giving constructive feedback on. And then also ending it with encouragement. Be like, oh, well, I'm here if you need any help with it. I know you can do this. This is great. And just making sure it ends on a positive note. So starting with the positive and ending with a positive encouragement is sort of why I'm calling it the constructive feedback sandwich. Because we're trying to sandwich that usually what we consider the hard part in between the positives. So an example could be your presentation had a lot of great information. And I like how clearly you laid out the topics at the beginning. It made it so easy to follow. But one area that could make it a little more effective is just simplifying some of the slides. And then if we're getting into the specifics, for example, on the third slide, there's a lot of text there, which can be sometimes overwhelming for some people. Maybe you could use bullet points or visuals for the key points instead, just to make it less text on the eyes. Overall, you did a great job explaining your ideas. With a few small adjustments, this presentation would be perfect, right? So we kind of see this like little example of the positive, constructive constructive feedback sandwich, right? We start with the positive, ends with the positive encouragement. And something that I like to do if I'm giving people any type of like feedback is instead of feeling, I don't want people to feel like I'm ordering them to do something. Like I'm telling them that they need to do it. So it can be helpful sometimes to offer advice in the form of yourself, right? So you're like, oh, I usually use bullet points or visuals, and I find that that helps me. And so kind of making it more personal so it feels sometimes less like an attack on them, something that you've learned and you're just helping them with. And also, again, just maybe offering your support. Like, oh, let me know if there's something I can do to help you out with it, if the situation is appropriate for them. So if you really struggle with giving constructive feedback, you can practice giving constructive feedback on anything. And so obviously we're focusing on it mainly for career purposes, but you can give constructive feedback on daily things like cooking. It could be your child's homework. It could be the relationship or friendship. So for example, yeah, if someone made you, maybe your significant other made a meal for you and it was good, but there's something that you really didn't like about it, you don't want them cooking it again and you having to struggle to eat it again if it was a little rough, right? So if they cook something, you could say, oh my gosh, I loved the texture of this. It made it so fun to eat. I wish it was a little bit sweeter. I think you could add a little bit more sugar and then it would be perfect, right? So just giving whatever advice that you have for whatever it is that they're cooking. And then again, just trying to think of that constructive feedback sandwich. And it's always good to keep in mind that when you're giving feedback, try to give it with the goal of improving them or helping them to improve and not attacking them, right? So don't use it as a tool to like hurt them if you're feeling a little moody that day. Try to make sure that you're there to support them and improve them with good intentions. So I hope you learned something new today. I know we covered a lot. I mean, between things like growth versus fixed mindset, developing a growth mindset, mapping an ideal life, revisiting and setting different goals, giving constructive feedback. There's a lot of stuff to think about, and I hope that it was useful to you. Right? So if you have the chance, try to map out your ideal life, set those goals, give your child some constructive feedback if possible. But I hope this is helpful for you. And so we'll end on this quote, especially since this whole training is focused on really building towards our future, right? So our ending quote is, today is the opportunity to build a tomorrow that you want. maybe tomorrow's too quick. So maybe you could say, today is the opportunity to build the year that you want, the future that you want. But again, thank you all for joining today's training. Our next one will be coming up in 3 months. And please remember to complete the survey, and you can use the link in the description box below on YouTube. Completing the survey will help you get your work participation hours for TANF, and also it helps us to know what you learned from the training, and also we can find out what you want to see in our future trainings. So if there's ever a topic that you want us to cover or dive into more, please let us know. We want these to be useful and helpful towards you. So that's all for today. Thank you again and have a great day.